I was sitting alone in the same living room where my kids once played, laughed, and loved me without conditions. But tonight, the house felt colder than ever. I looked at their old photos and wondered how the children I raised with love became strangers waiting for my death just to collect my money. They arrived that afternoon not to see me, not to ask if I was okay, but to remind me that I was running out of time. Their eyes didn't carry love, only impatience. When I asked them to help set the table, they looked at me like I was a burden in my own home. My daughter smirked, my son shrugged, as if kindness was too expensive for them. Then came the words that cut deeper than any knife. "Just sign the inheritance papers, Dad," my daughter shouted, and my son slammed his fist on the table. "Stop wasting our time." I went to my room, closed the door, and finally let the tears fall. For years I told myself I was overthinking. But now I knew my kids didn't love me. They loved the $33 million waiting for them. I opened my safe, the same safe that once protected my family's future. Inside were documents my wife and I made together, dreams we built, memories we cherished. And suddenly I knew what I had to do. With a shaking hand, I signed the papers, not the inheritance papers they wanted, but donation papers. Every last penny, $33 million gone from their reach forever. They came back the next morning, smiling. They thought today was payday. But I sat there calmly, sipping my coffee, waiting for the storm. I slid the donation documents across the table. Their smiles froze, their eyes widened. My daughter whispered, trembling, "You gave it all away." They screamed, they cursed, they accused me of ruining their future. But as they raged, I realized something. I wasn't losing children that day. I was finally seeing the truth. I packed a small suitcase, walked to the door. And for the first time in years, I felt light. My son shouted behind me, "You can't walk away." But I already had. Now I live in a quiet cabin in the mountains. No noise, no greed, just peace. And sometimes I smile, wondering if my kids ever learned that love cannot be bought and inheritance is earned, not expected. It's a strange thing to know the price of your own children's love. It's not a price you ever want to calculate, and God knows you hope you're wrong. You tell yourself that the distance, the coolness, the constant, subtle appraisal in their eyes is just a phase or your own paranoia. A parent's heart is a desperate optimist. But then life, in its cruel, clarifying way, gives you the final receipt. For me, that receipt was for $33 million. My name is Arthur. I spent my life building a quiet, simple existence. I was a history teacher, if you can believe it. I stood in front of classrooms for 35 years, trying to convince teenagers that the fall of the Roman Empire was more relevant to their lives than the latest social media scandal. It was a good life, a meaningful life. I raised 2 children, David and Chloe, in a house filled with books, and I thought with love. Their mother, Elena, was the center of that universe, when cancer took her. Center would not hold. The gravity was gone. David was 25, Chloe 23. They grieved, of course they did, but their grief quickly became entangled with something else, something I was too blind or too heartbroken to see clearly. You see, Elena came from old money. The kind of money that doesn't talk about itself, the kind that sits in trust funds and municipal bonds, quietly compounding. I never touched a penny of it. My pride, my sense of self, was built on my own 2 feet. That money was her security, and eventually it would be the children's. We never made a secret of it. It was just a fact of our lives, like the old oak tree in the backyard. We knew it was there, but we didn't spend our days staring at it. After Elena was gone, the tree began to cast a very long, very cold shadow. The first sign was the questions, masquerading as concern. "Dad, you're looking tired. Are you sure you should still be teaching? That commute must be brutal." Then it was the suggestions. "You know, Mom would have wanted you to be comfortable. You should really think about retiring. We worry about you." At first, I was touched. They cared. But the subtext, once you learn the language, is deafening. They were waiting. They were counting the days until my life, my inconvenient, modest, self-sufficient life, was over and their windfall began. David, my son, the once ambitious architect, started taking on fewer projects. He and his wife bought a house. A rather large house for a couple with a single income. The math didn't add up until you factored in an expected future subsidy. Chloe began talking about a portfolio career, dabbling in interior design and lifestyle blogging, all while driving a car that cost more than my first house. There was an air of preemptive inheritance about them, a life lived on credit against a death that had not yet occurred. I started feeling like a placeholder, a temporary custodian of their future wealth. Our conversations became transactional. They'd call, but the warmth was gone. It was a checklist. "How are you? Healthy? Any new aches and pains? See a doctor lately?" It was a wellness check on an asset. I was no longer their father. I was the final obstacle between them and their true parent, that $33 million trust. The loneliness was astronomical. To have the 2 people you love most in the world, the 2 people for whom you'd have willingly stepped in front of a bus, see you not as a person, but as a financial event, it hollows you out. You start to question your own reality. Am I being unfair? Am I just a bitter old man? The psychological torture of it is that the crime is one of omission. They weren't actively cruel, they were passively avaricious. Their sin was not what they did, but what they failed to do, see me. And then one Tuesday afternoon it crystallized. I was in the hospital for a minor, completely routine procedure, a colonoscopy. The kind of thing you joke about. When I came out of the anesthesia, fuzzy and disoriented, the nurse told me my children were in the waiting room. My heart lifted for a moment. But when she went to get them, I overheard them in the hallway before they entered. I wasn't meant to hear it. David's voice, low and tense. For God's sake, it was just a scope. I had to cancel a client meeting for this. And Chloe's reply, a sigh of profound inconvenience. I know, I just wish he'd be more careful. At his age, you never know. They walked in then, their faces instantly rearranged into masks of bland concern. How are you feeling, Dad? But I had seen behind the curtain. In that moment, I saw the rest of my life laid out before me. A series of medical scares, each one a roller coaster of their feigned concern and hidden disappointment if I pulled through. I would be living on borrowed time in their eyes, and every extra day I drew breath would be a day I was costing them. That was the day I decided. I went home, I sat in Alina's old armchair, the one that still held the faintest whisper of her perfume, and I made a plan. The execution was a quiet, secret joy. I contacted the family lawyer, old Benjamin Croft, a man who had known Alina since she was a girl. I laid it out for him. At first, he was horrified. Arthur, they are your children. This is their legacy. I looked him in the eye and said, Benjamin, a legacy is what you build, not what you're given. They are waiting for a transaction, not honoring a legacy. I'm going to give them what they have earned, nothing. We spent months structuring it. I won't bore you with the legal intricacies, but we found a way. A series of charitable foundations, all in Alina's name. A cancer research institute she had volunteered for. A literacy program for underprivileged kids, the kind she would have loved. An arts endowment. We picked organizations that were lean, effective, and hungry. We would fund scholarships, research grants, community centers. We would turn that cold, silent money into a roaring river of good. The day of the reading of the will was a scene from a play I had already watched in my mind 100 times. We sat in Benjamin's opulent office. David, Chloe, and I, they were dressed for a celebration, trying to hide their smug anticipation. Benjamin, his voice steady and grave, read through the preliminaries. I watched their faces. They were barely listening, mentally spending their shares. And then Benjamin came to the relevant clause. He cleared his throat. Upon my death, he read, my words echoing in that silent, tense room, the entirety of the trust held in my and my late wife Alina's name, valued at approximately $33 million, is to be liquidated and distributed in equal shares to the following charitable organizations. He listed them, one after another. The Arthur and Alina Bennett Fellowship for Medical Research, the Alina Bennett Literacy Initiative, on and on. The names hung in the air like verdicts. There was a moment of perfect, uncomprehending silence. Then chaos. Chloe was the first to break. What is this? This is a joke. Her voice was a shriek, tearing through the dignified quiet of the room. David stood up, his face a thundercloud of fury. He pointed a trembling finger at me. You can't do this. That's our money, Mom's money. I looked at them, these two strangers I had raised. I felt a profound and terrible calm. It was your mother's money, I said, my voice quiet but firm. And my money, and we can do with it what we see fit. You didn't want a legacy. You wanted a lottery ticket. You didn't honor your mother's memory. You monetized it. You didn't see me as your father. You saw me as a gatekeeper, so I have opened the gate. The money is going to people who will see it not as an ending, but as a beginning. The vitriol that poured out of them then. It was a confirmation of every terrible suspicion I'd ever had. They called me a bitter, vindictive old man. They said I was stealing from them. They accused me of not loving them. The ultimate irony. They believed that my refusal to fund their avarice was a lack of love, never understanding that their avarice was the truest lack of love imaginable. They stormed out. That was, let's see, almost 4 years ago now. I've not heard from them since. No calls on my birthday, no Christmas cards, nothing. The silence is the final proof of my thesis. I was only as valuable as my bank account. Do I regret it? Every single day, and not a single day. I regret that it came to this. I mourn the loss of my children, the ghosts of the people they might have been. I lie awake some nights and wonder if there was another path, a different word I could have said, a different action I could have taken that would have opened their eyes instead of slamming the door. The emotional landscape of this decision is not a simple, victorious plain. It's a complex, treacherous mountain range of sorrow and conviction. But I do not regret the action itself, because in that final, devastating act, I reclaimed my soul. I refused to be the ATM in their narrative. I chose meaning over dynasty. I took the weight of that money, the weight that was crushing the last remnants of my family, and I transformed it. I turned it into hope for a young researcher and education for a child who craves knowledge, a moment of beauty for someone who needs it. That's the part so many people miss. They think I gave away the money out of spite. It wasn't spite. It was salvation. My own. You know, when you go through something like this, you start to see the world differently. You see how we conflate wealth with worth, how we confuse an inheritance with a life. We spend so much time waiting for our ship to come in that we forget we're standing on the shore, with the vast, beautiful, terrifying ocean of our own lives right in front of us. Hit the like button if this part hits home for you. If you've ever felt valued for what you provide rather than for who you are, then you know this particular flavor of heartache. I live a simple life now. I still live in the same house. I have my books, my garden, my memories of a leaner, the real ones, not the gold-plated ones. I volunteer at the local library reading to children. I am, in my own small way, a living part of the legacy I created. The money is doing its work out in the world, and I am doing my work here in my small corner of it. There is a peace in that, a peace that $33 million in the bank could never have bought me. And share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. Truly. Your stories, your struggles, they matter. We're all just trying to find our way to make our lives mean something before the final curtain falls. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Don't wait for an inheritance to start living your life. And don't let anyone else treat your life as their waiting room. Build your own legacy, one built on character, on love, on the small, daily acts of decency that no amount of money can ever purchase. Because in the end, the only thing you truly own is your soul. I did not donate my money, I redeemed it.